many countries has America invaded since the Second World War? America has been in 19 wars since World War II. The death toll from modern American wars killed in the name of freedom is over 20 million and counting. They have overthrown 36 governments, attempted to assassinate over 50 foreign leaders, and dropped bombs on people in over 30 countries. Syria was the latest of 14 countries in the Islamic world that US forces have invaded, occupied, or bombed. But you believe your American media when they say Putin is a crazy warmongering dictator. Is your self-righteous indignation based on an understanding of basic history, or just triggered by the next new bandwagon that is trending on mainstream media? 90% of these deaths are ordinary men, women, and children. They started the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Gulf War. In the last 60 years or so, the list of countries the US invaded includes Bosnia, Cambodia, the Congo, Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Indonesia. There's been wars in Iraq, wars in Afghanistan, wars in Syria, Central America. They are the global bullies, destroying any country in the name of democracy and human rights. But the intention has always been to strip the nation of its resources and enrich their military-industrial complex. Now, what about Britain? Did you know that there are only 22 countries in the world that the UK have not invaded or helped in starting a war? The hypocrisy of the West is an abomination. Where was the sense of injustice when George Bush and Tony Blair invaded Iraq? Even after the UN weapons inspector Hans Blix visited Iraq and confirmed that there were no weapons of mass destruction. What a coincidence that Mr. Blix was found dead from suicide. Do any of you actually know Ukraine is not even a sovereign country? The state of Ukraine does not exist. If people just stopped and educated themselves before flinging themselves into a frenzy of indignant theatrics all over social media, they would discover that in 2014, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon stated that since December 1991, Ukraine has not registered its borders as an independent country. Ukraine is still under the territory of Russia, and everything that happens in this area is in fact an internal matter of Russia. And as far as Putin is concerned, there is no invasion. But now suddenly you're all Ukrainian. You all stand with George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and Marina Abramovich. Everyone is so used to instant news, like instant coffee and instant noodles or instant text messages, you don't have the patience to step back, to query the historical context of present-day events, to educate yourself on an intricate and complicated ancient conflict. So my question is, when everyone starts shouting on the rooftops that today they stand with Ukraine, do they realize that they're actually standing with Russia?
There's no doubt about it, we're living in times of catastrophic crisis where the lives of innocent civilians are sacrificed in the wars of their masters. Yes, in Ukraine, but not only. Since the last plenary, tens of thousands of Afghani citizens have been forced to flee in search of food and safety. 5 million children face famine, an agonising and painful death, a 500% increase in child marriages and children being sold just so they can survive, and not a mention of it, not here, not anywhere. No wall-to-wall TV coverage, no emergency humanitarian response, no special plenaries, not even a mention in this plenary, no Afghani delegations and no statements. My God, they must be wondering, what makes their humanitarian crisis so unimportant? Is it the colour of their skin? Is it that they're not white, they're not European, that their problems come from a US gun or a US invasion? Is it that the decision to rob their country's wealth was taken by a despotic US president rather than a Russian one? Because, my God, all wars are evil and all victims deserve support, and until we get on that page, we have no credibility whatsoever.
Now, here's something you are not going to hear on the mainstream media. What you do hear is warmongers arguing that we must protect Ukraine because it is a quote-unquote democracy. But they're lying. Ukraine isn't actually a democracy. For example, to hold on to power, Ukraine's president shut down the 3 TV stations that were openly criticizing him and his policies, imprisoned the head of the opposition political party that had come in second place in their elections, and went and arrested and jailed that party's leaders. This is exactly what Putin has been accused of doing. But Ukraine did this all with the support of the United States.
This Ukraine crisis is really a mask-off moment, because you are seeing the implicit hypocrisy, how they have so much outrage, and the whole world is defending Ukraine, but they said nothing about Iraq and Syria and Libya and all of these countries which they destroyed. They want to support Ukrainians' right to resist. You know, if you want to take up armed resistance in Ukraine, that's totally fine, right? They're even going to go and crowdfund the weapons for you online, and they're even going to come and fight with you. But if you're a Palestinian, well, screw you. If you're an Iraqi or Syrian and you're resisting the Israeli occupation or the American occupation, you're a terrorist. They want sovereignty and respect sovereignty for Ukraine, and they respect its territorial integrity. What about Syria that gets bombed every week by Israel? What about Syria, the Golan Heights that are occupied by Israel? What about northern Syria, northeastern Syria occupied by the Americans? You set the Middle East on fire. Libya, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, Afghanistan. I can't count anymore, man. Millions of people turned to refugees. Millions of people killed, displaced. Look how they treat them. The people are saying we'll accept white refugees because they look like us. They're civilized. Oh, and Syrians and Iraqis and the people whose lives you destroyed, they're not civilized? They don't deserve to seek refuge? What kind of bullshit double standard is that? You got these racist hosts on TV talking about, well, it's okay, it's normal for war to be in Iraq or Afghanistan, and we'll take in the Ukrainian refugees because they look like us. They have blonde hair and blue eyes.
Me, I'm sorry, it's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles.
But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too, city where you wouldn't expect that or hope that it's going to happen.
And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
When you look at what happened in the last refugee crisis in Europe back in 2015, Poland was one of the EU countries that, was hesitant to take in refugees. Talk about what has changed and the different position now.
Yeah, well, just to put it bluntly, these are not refugees from Syria. These are refugees from neighboring Ukraine. I mean, that, quite frankly, is part of it. These are Christians, they're white, they're very similar to many people who live in Poland.
On ne parle pas là de Syriens qui fuient des bombardements du régime syrien soutenu par Vladimir Poutine. On parle d'Européens qui partent à leurs voitures qui ressemblent à nos voitures.
Il y a une différence entre les Ukrainiens qui, encore une fois, participent de notre espace civilisationnel avec des populations qui appartiennent à d'autres civilisations.
On voit bien ce qu'ils fuient et il n'est pas question de dire est-ce que vous êtes vraiment des réfugiés. On est au XXIe siècle, on est dans une ville européenne et on a des tirs de missiles de croisière comme si on était en Irak ou en Afghanistan, vous imaginez.
The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science and stepping up to protect each other is the best way to continue to ensure our freedoms, our rights, our values as a country. We are not intimidated by those who hurl insults and abuse at small business workers and steal food from the homeless. We won't give in to those who fly racist flags. We won't cave to those who engage in vandalism or dishonor the memory of our veterans. So to those responsible for this behavior, it needs to stop.
There's a level of admiration I actually have for China, because their basic dictatorship is allowing them to actually turn their economy around on a dime and say, we need to go green as fast as we need to start, investing in solar. I mean, there is a flexibility that I know Stephen Harper must dream about, of having a dictatorship that he could do everything he wanted, that I find quite interesting.
Regardless of the fact that we are attacking your fundamental rights or limiting your fundamental rights, and the Charter says that's wrong, we're still going to go ahead and do with it.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act to supplement provincial and territorial capacity to address the blockades and occupations.
We went after the funding. Our efforts, combined with the city's efforts, eliminated the GoFundMe. $10 million are no longer accessible to the demonstrators. There are other funding avenues that we continue to aggressively go after through intelligence, information, coordination with financial institutions, and all three levels of government.
We are broadening the scope of Canada's anti-money laundering and terrorist financing rules so that they cover crowdfunding platforms and the payment service providers they use.
We will be relentless in pursuing the funding that has enabled this demonstration to continue to this point.
These changes cover all forms of transactions, including digital assets, such as cryptocurrencies.
I want to be very clear. The scope of these measures will be time-limited, geographically targeted, as well as reasonable and proportionate to the threats they are meant to address. The Emergencies Act will be used to strengthen and support law enforcement agencies at all levels across the country. This is about keeping Canadians safe, protecting people's jobs, and restoring confidence in our institutions.
As of today, a bank or other financial service provider will be able to immediately freeze or suspend an account without a court order.
Justin Trudeau, I mean, I thought he was kind of a cool guy. Then I started to read what he said. This is a couple of weeks ago. He was, or maybe this is September, but he was talking about people who are not vaccinated. He said they don't believe in science. They're often misogynistic, often racist. No, they're not.
That was not smart of him at all.
Right. He said, but they take up space. And with that, we have to make a choice in terms of a leader as a country. Do we tolerate these people? It's like, tolerate these? Now you do sound like Hitler.
Canada and our allies will defend democracy. We are taking these actions today to stand against authoritarianism. The people of Ukraine, like all people, must be free to determine their own future. We will continue working with our international partners to safeguard Ukraine's territorial integrity and prevent further Russian aggression.
After World War II, communism became the bugaboo, and the Soviet Union became the enemy. And even though, and one of the things the CIA did right after World War II was hire a lot of Nazis. Guys who'd been Nazis were now recycled and brought into the CIA. The Nazi rocket scientist, von Braun, went to work for the United States developing intercontinental ballistic missiles. So the Nazi past was forgiven, and Nazis went to work for the United States, including a guy named Reinhard Gehlen, who'd been the Nazi intelligence, military intelligence officer in charge of operations against the Soviets in Eastern Europe. And this guy, Gelin, became the head of the CIA's main intelligence operator into East Berlin and areas like the Ukraine, where the Nazis had intelligence agents during World War II. And this guy, Reinhard Gelin, on behalf of his new CIA masters, just activated all the agent nets that he had during World War II. The same thing was going on in Ukraine, although the Ukraine had very much large swaths of its population were fascists and were actively involved against the war against the Soviets and were enemies of the United States in World War II. After World War II, they became assets of the CIA. So the CIA has been developing fascist assets in the Ukraine for 70 years. And every year, since 1948, when the CIA went into operation, it has had a station in the Ukraine with a CIA officer who's running operations. And those operations have all been directed against first the Soviet Union, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, against Russia. There's a lot of momentum that has built up over 75 years. Vast agent nets have been put in place. Sleeper agents have been in place for decades, and they're all working against Russia, which is why nowadays it's so hard for the mainstream media and the government to shift and even consider for a moment having good relations with Russia. NATO, its whole mandate and its whole reason for its existence has been to threaten and roll back Russia and eventually sabotage and subvert it and put it out of business. And Ukraine, the CIA's operations in the Ukraine are the cutting-edge vanguard of this effort. So if you look at recent events in Ukraine, you have to see them in that context. How, for decades, the CIA has been trying to recruit Ukrainian politicians, Ukrainian businessmen, who are sympathetic and compatible with Western American ideas and values and interests of fighting against the Russians, and recruiting them and putting them in place, and setting them up with bank accounts, giving them paramilitary training, everything the CIA does across the board. Ukraine has been the vanguard of this operation against Russia. The details are in my book. The CIA's organized crime, how this works at the agent level, how the CIA would go around and work with after the coup that threw out a pro-Russian government and installed a pro-American anti-Russian government, how the CIA already had security services and military people in place who were able to create private militias that would then work against individuals in the Ukraine who were pro-Russian, how they, just like treating it like South Vietnam or any other country that the United States occupies. And that is the situation in the Ukraine. The United States occupies Ukraine. Its government is an occupation government that's supported and funded and directed by the United States. And the businessmen and the military people and the politicians that support the Americans benefit, and those who don't are put on hit lists and they're targeted. And that's basically the history and the summary of what's going on in the Ukraine. And the CIA, through its agent operations, which have been in place for 70 years, is at the vanguard of that operation.
So is the intent and purpose of the CIA and American involvement in Ukraine to topple Russia, to balkanize Russia?
Oh, absolutely, but also to steal to take all the natural resources that are available there, the profits that can be had. I mean, it's capitalism. As soon as the CIA arranged that coup and installed a pro-American government, Joe Biden's son became the head of one of the biggest oil companies, I think it was, in the Ukraine. You know, I mean, American businessmen just swooped down like vultures to take over all the, you know, any business that could, that like mafia dons and mafia, you know, gangsters that they could steal everything from. And that's exactly what they're doing. And especially in eastern Ukraine, where a lot of the natural resource industries are based, that's why it's so contentious there. The CIA, through its assets in private industry, is trying to bring all those people who are considered compatible into the American fold. You don't see it at its dirty level, the level of blackmailing people, the level of extorting people, the level of the CIA using its underworld contacts to squeeze these people and to force them out of business and to make life miserable for them so that they give up their associations with Russians and Russian businessmen. But that's what's going on at the very basic level. I mean, militias are being formed to terrorize anybody who's supporting Russia, and you know, like in Donbass and places like that. And the reason it's targeting the people that targets most highly are the people that are sitting on natural resources that American businessmen want. It's not going after, you know, plumbers and carpenters. It's going after major businessmen. And that's what the CIA does. It paves the way for American business interests by using illegal methods. And by using illegal methods to install politicians in the Ukraine that will follow the American line. Everything that you don't know about that is going on, and that you're not told about by the media.
Outlined there, you know, for the past 6 years, we've lived with a Remainer chattering classes who have demonized national identity. They've described national sovereignty as being basically xenophobia. They've mocked everyone who waves the English flag or the UK flag. And now, lo and behold, with the crisis in Ukraine, they've discovered that actually those things are very important and they have real meaning. And there's a real hypocrisy to this, you know, from people who support the EU and from the EU itself. They're now talking about how important national sovereignty is in Ukraine. These are the people who have undermined national sovereignty, not only in the UK, but across Europe over the past few decades. So I'm glad they're finally discovering that national sovereignty is important. I wish they'd discovered it a bit sooner.
I really think that there's so much misinformation. We've never really seen anything like it. I mean, I've been covering wars now for 35 years, and I have never seen people with their nails done in the Ukrainian flag, right? I mean, we're being corralled into this box where we either have to hate Vladimir Putin and believe everything evil that's said about him and love Ukraine, and there's no in between. And that reminds me a lot of, you're either, you know, a white supremacist, or you go with the Democrat narrative on everything under the sun. Although, you know, these days it's hard to believe anything that our leaders tell us, because they've lied about COVID, they lied about Russia collusion, they lied about the Ukraine impeachment trial, and there's so much more going on in Ukraine that nobody is talking about. You see such dishonesty when it comes to the history of Ukraine. You see dishonesty when it comes to the Azov battalion, which is funded by the US and NATO. I mean, you can find pictures of them online holding up the NATO flag and the swastika at the same time. Their own emblem contains the black sun of the occult, which was a Nazi SS emblem. And it also contains the sideways, you know, lightning insignia of the SS. I mean, this is on throughout the Ukrainian military. You can see that black sun of the occult on their body armor, even on the female soldiers who are paraded in front of the world as being, you know, such an example of Ukraine's independence and spirit and nobility. Even they are wearing the black sun of the occult. And, you know, the White House wants you to believe, well, this doesn't matter. It's just a small number of troops. It's not true. The Azov battalion has been murdering its way through eastern Ukraine.
Yeah.
We don't want to admit this. This was why Crimea voted for independence. This is why Crimea wanted to be with Russia. Because we in the media, in the Western media and in the West, won't acknowledge the reality of what's gone on. Western Ukraine backed the Nazis. It was a headquarters for the Nazi SS. The CIA under Alan Dulles actually gave immunity from prosecution to the Nazis of Ukraine from the Nuremberg trials. So there's a long history of the United States and our intelligence agencies funding and arming Nazis in Ukraine. These are not like new neo-Nazi groups that sprung up. These are the actual Nazis from the Second World War, who, if you go back to the Nuremberg trials, said that they were planning for a 1,000-year Reich. And so you have to really wonder as you look at this, when you know that the CIA sponsored the Color Revolution in Ukraine in 2013 and 14, that they selected Ukraine's leaders, go to Victoria Nuland's leaked phone conversation where she and the U.S. ambassador are deciding who can lead Ukraine. I mean, there's as much interference here as you could possibly imagine before you even get to Hunter Biden, Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, and Mitt Romney, and all of their children who are employed, who earn millions from Ukrainian gas companies.
Yeah, you are pointing, pardon me, to a real credibility crisis for our leaders. I want to let Karen Turk jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the fact that President Zelensky is Jewish, and I don't know exactly how this factors in, but there's some very interesting points in what you're saying. And
what troubles me about the moment that we're in is that we have such a selective and a narrow reading of history. You know, President Zelensky may be Jewish, but he's not the only one in this who suffered during the Second World War, whose ancestors suffered, right? I mean, look at Putin. How many relatives did he lose in the siege of St. Petersburg? People don't know their history. They don't know what made Vladimir Putin. And I'm not I'm not defending him. I don't need to defend Vladimir Putin. My job as a journalist is to try to understand what is the truth here. I don't like being lied to, and we're being lied to on an epic scale. When we're told your only choice is you have to be 100% with Zelensky, who's a puppet, who you can find on the internet in black stilettos and leather pants, you know, with shirtless, doing a spoof Dancing with the Stars kind of entertainment video. That's a mock of a Ukrainian group that does this kind of satanic occult type of music video. And I mean, Zelensky was selected like so many of our leaders. And honestly, with big tech and with election fraud these days, we don't know how many leaders all around the world have been selected for us and weren't actually voted in. But what we do know is that there are increasing problems with technology and the digitization of our world. Because look at what's happening with COVID. Look at what has happened globally. We are fighting the same battles all over the world. To pretend that this war is about Russia and Ukraine is just a barefaced lie. If Putin has been warning for 15 years that he is not going to stand by while the globalists take over the world, build bioweapons facilities and whatever else they're doing in Ukraine, Ukrainian oligarchs, Ukraine has been a center of money laundering for, you know, many of the leaders in this country. For how long? Billions of US dollars have been laundered through Ukraine, and we say nothing about it. These are our tax dollars. I mean, before the impeachment trial, had you ever heard of anyone in the United States, I mean, us bringing in foreign governments to the White House for anti-corruption training? I mean, does nobody question these things? Why do we not question them? We have an idiot like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who goes at the impeachment trial and sits there as a lieutenant colonel. He didn't even make colonel. And he's telling the president of the United States what his policy should be. You have a traitor in the form of Maria Yovanovitch, who was Obama's ambassador, who's telling Ukrainian government officials, don't listen to the will of the American people. Don't listen to the election results. We are the true leaders of America. I mean, and then people object when the woman isn't even fired. She's given a cushy job for life at Georgetown University at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer. I mean, there's so much hypocrisy and dishonesty here, and Ukraine is at the center of it all.
finally gets called out over the hypocrisy on war crimes committed in Ukraine. Hypocrisy should be adopted as the official slogan of this administration. In this case, it's related to Russia being accused of committing war crimes in Ukraine and the Biden admin calling for International Criminal Court, ICC, to investigate. However, the reporter points out a crucial piece of information that Biden's team wanted to keep hidden. Dylan Hausman from the Daily Caller reports that State Department spokesman Ned Price defended America's hypocrisy regarding the International Criminal Court during a press briefing Thursday. Watch.
Especially as it relates to the ICC, you're welcoming this investigation by the ICC prosecutor. You haven't always welcomed investigations at the ICC that ICC prosecutors have gone into. In fact, in the previous administration, that an investigation into potential war crimes in Afghanistan was met with actual sanctions on ICC staff. And the U.S. has consistently warned the ICC not to take up cases involving Israel. So, given that neither Ukraine nor Russia is a member of the ICC, and that for the ICC to take up a case involving non-member would require a UN Security Council vote, which is doomed since the Russians will veto it, where exactly do you think that justice is going to come from here?
Well, Matt, not only is neither Russia nor Ukraine a state party to the Rome Statute, neither are we, as you know. And the concerns we have over the ICC is a certain of jurisdiction in certain circumstances. Those remain. Those have not gone away. But at the same time,
so those concerns relate only when the U.S. is being. You have those concerns only if the U.S. is being investigated or Israel?
The United States, as we've spoken to, has the capability, has the wherewithal to conduct independent, thorough investigations. But we recognize the meaningful role that the ICC can play in promoting accountability for atrocities. And we have supported and will continue to support the ICC's efforts in certain cases.
But first, what exactly is democracy? Well, pluralism is the hallmark of it. In a democracy, citizens can have any opinion they want to have. They can express any opinion they want in public whenever they care to express it, including through mass media. If citizens are dissatisfied with their political leadership, they can challenge their leaders for office. Now, all of these things are true in every free country in any period, always. These are not just features of democracy. These are prerequisites for democracy. So with that in mind, you should know about a political party in Ukraine called Opposition Platform for Life. With 43 seats in parliament, it is the largest opposition party in that country. Over the weekend, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, banned that party. Opposition Platform for Life is now prohibited from, quote, all activity within Ukraine. So with a single command, Zelensky made it impossible for anybody to run against him for president. He did this not just to Opposition Platform for Life, but to 10 other political parties that he believed were insufficiently loyal to him. They're all illegal now. Obviously, there's a war underway in Ukraine, and on that basis, Zelensky has declared martial law. But we must tell you there is no evidence that the opposition parties he banned were aiding Russia in its war against Ukraine. Opposition Platform for Life, for example, denounced the Russian invasion the moment it happened, just like everybody else. But Zelensky took the opportunity to turn Ukraine into effectively a one-party state, which it now is. So having banned all opposition, he then seized control of the country's media outlets. Zelensky signed a decree that combines all national television channels into a single platform that he controls. He described this as a, quote, unified information policy, and it certainly is unified. So if all of these details seem shocking to you, if this is not the Zelensky you've heard about on the Today Show, then you may not have been paying attention to Ukraine. Zelensky has been solidifying complete control over Ukraine for a long time, since long before the Russian invasion and the war. Last year, he had his main political opponent arrested and his assets seized by the state. At the same time, Zelensky shut down 3 of Ukraine's most popular television networks, channels that, not coincidentally, had criticized him. So how should we as Americans assess this? Well, first and most obviously, by admitting this is authoritarianism, it's not democracy. And with that concern in mind, you should be very worried by your leader's response to what's happening in Ukraine, the growing dictatorship there. And that's the word for it. What's another word for it? If you have ideas, send it to us. On the very same day that Zelensky shut down opposition media and all opposition political parties, professional liar and Atlantic Magazine pundit David Frum posted this on Twitter, verbatim, quote, "Ukraine may be the first example in human history of a country that, under the pressure of war, is becoming more tolerant and more liberal." Right. So when you outlaw all criticism of yourself, that's called tolerance. It's called democracy. But don't take the word of a single Canadian warmonger propagandist. David Frum is hardly alone in telling you that. All of Washington is telling you that. Watch.
So proud of President Zelensky and the courage that he has shown. And in Congress, we are trying to get the administration on board.
And President Biden is showing moral leadership, just like President Zelensky is showing moral leadership.
He, of course, by his example, shows the kind of courage we all hope we can reach and provide at a moment of real testing.
Government doesn't give us our rights. Our rights come to us from God, and government is just a shared tool to secure them. And you see that spirit, that American Philadelphia 1787 spirit in Zelensky right now.
God, these people. And again, on one level, you can understand why people are whipped into an emotional frenzy when they talk about Ukraine. Why wouldn't they be? Russia's invasion of Ukraine was shocking. It was wrong. The suffering of civilians there is entirely real. We're watching it on TV. It's horrifying. So it's entirely natural to root for the Ukrainians to expel the invaders, and obviously we are rooting for them to expel the invaders, Russia. But just because what Russia has done in Ukraine was wrong doesn't mean you have to lie about the Ukrainian government. In fact, if you really cared about the Ukrainian people and all the people you just saw on TV, we care so much, you wouldn't want them to live under a dictator. So you'd be highly upset about what Zelensky just did. So again, Ukraine was invaded by its neighbors, and we oppose that. We should oppose that. But that doesn't mean Ukraine is a democracy. It's not. And we shouldn't tell Americans it is, because that's a lie. Why go the extra step to tell us that Ukraine is a model democracy when it's not at all? So maybe you're starting to conclude that these people love Zelensky not because he represents the Ukrainian people, but because Zelensky is exactly the leader they would like to be, with wildly expanded war powers to make everyone who complains shut up at gunpoint.
You've got a country led by a man who, even before the war, Axios, The Guardian, the Atlantic Council, all of them were reporting that Zelensky, even though he ran on an anti-corruption ticket, has, through the Panama Papers and other such leaks, has stashed his millions offshore like most corrupt oligarchs have. And so even before the war, his corruption was known. And then you fast forward to what he's done over this weekend with the banning of 11 opposition parties. And I want to note at this stage that he banned these opposition parties, including, as you mentioned, Tucker, the second largest in his parliament, while the Nazi elements, and I use the word Nazi, not neo-Nazi, because these are actual Nazis that aren't neo in any sense. They're the continuation of Nazis as we know them and study them in history. And Bandera, the man that they revere, was actually a Nazi, and they've made him into a national hero and icon. The Nazis in Ukraine have not been banned by Zelensky. And so this is a very interesting point, that you've got a man that's that we're hailing as a democratic icon who's fighting for freedom and democracy in our way of life, banning all opposition parties, controlling this, through the state the media narrative, while refusing not only to ban Nazis, but having, after not banning them, incorporated them into his state. Azov as a battalion formally serves in the Ukrainian National Guard. Now, people say to that in response, yeah, but Majid, there are racists in every country. No, the analogy here is, imagine, Tucker, in America, the KKK had a formal battalion in the US military. That's what we've got with swastikas and Nazi insignia inside the Ukrainian army. And then people would say, well, what do you want to do? Putin invaded their country. Of course, they have to fight. And I find this line of argument absolutely absurd, because the best analogy is with Syria. Now, Putin allying with Nazis in Ukraine to defeat Putin is as absurd as allying with ISIS in Syria to defeat Putin. You've got an extremist, an armed, extreme terrorist militia known as ISIS. None of us ever had any moral difficulty in understanding that Assad was a dictator, that Putin's support for Assad was wrong, but the people opposing him, the jihadists, were also wrong. Why can't we have that moral complexity when it comes to Ukraine?
And keep the UK, and particularly the United States, my country, free. If you're for freedom in Ukraine, you can't try and shut down honest questions in this country or punish people for telling the truth. It's super simple, I would say.
Я знаю, що як журналіст я маю бути об'єктивним, маю бути виваженим для того, щоб повідомляти вам інформацію з холодним серцем, але направду триматися зараз дуже важко, особливо в такий час, і якраз уже нас на Росії називають нацистами, фашистами і так далі, я дозволю собі зацитувати слова Адольфа Ейхмана, який сказав, що для того, щоб знищити націю, потрібно нищити в першу чергу дітей. Тому що, вбиваючи їхніх батьків, діти виростуть і обов'язково помстяться. Вбиваючи дітей, вони ніколи не виростуть, і нація зникне. Як Збройні сили України не можуть нищити російських дітей, тому що це заборонено правилами війни, і це заборонено різними конвенціями, в тому числі Женевськими. Але я не зі Збройних сил України. І коли мені випаде нагода розправитися з росіянами, я обов'язково це зроблю. Я дотримуюсь, раз ви вже називаєте нацистами, дотримуюсь доктрини Адольфа Ейхмана і зроблю все, що від мене залежить, для того, щоб ні ви, ні ваші діти ніколи не жили на цій землі. Для того, щоб ви відчули, як воно, коли вмирають ні в чому не винні цивільні люди. Для того, щоб ви відчули весь біль і страждання, коли ви говорите, а ми не починали війни, це все Путін. Ми не хотіли цієї війни. Ми теж її не хотіли. Але тепер ви мусите розуміти, що тут йдеться про перемогу українського народу, а не мир. Нам потрібна перемога. І якщо для цього доведеться вирізати всі ваші сім'ї, я буду одним із перших, хто це зробить. Слава нації! І сподіваємось, що такої нації, як Росія і росіяни, ніколи більше не залишаться на цій землі. Тому що це просто виродки, які засмічують цю землю. І якщо в українців є можливість, що вони зараз в принципі роблять, трощити, різати, вбивати, душити москальноту, я сподіваюся, що кожен внесе свій вклад і замочить хоча б одного москаля.
So I'm watching BBC News at 10, and I've got a nice little piece about Ukrainian army training civilians in Ukraine.
Civilians are turning out for weapons training. Lesson over, the guns are returned.
But hold on, can you see that right there?
These are not would-be
That is the symbol
frontline soldiers.
of C. That symbol there is a symbol of C-14, a neo-Nazi group in Ukraine that were famous, or infamous, for carrying out pogroms against Romani people in Kiev, also attacking left-wing groups as well as LGBTQ groups. Also, they celebrate Hitler's birthday, and this group is presented uncritically on BBC News at 10 by Jeremy Boeing, no mention of any of this.
At least not yet.
I believe that during these times we just learn to be ready. That is what I think. We just
Unreal. Absolutely unreal. The whole world's gone mad.
I'm going to do everything I can to minimize Putin's price hike here at home. We understand Putin's war against the people of Ukraine is causing prices to rise. People are already feeling Putin's price hikes at the pump. Make no mistake, inflation is largely the fault of Putin.
For the president to turn to try to pretend like prices weren't already rising, I mean, I don't think people are candidly that dumb. I mean, we remember the inflation was going on long before this happened. It's absolutely true this is making it worse, but to sort of whitewash what happened all of last year, I don't think is going to work for them politically.
But look at this chart on gas prices just since February. If you look at the, I mean, it is a shocking increase. That although if you look at the numbers, inflation really started to rise almost exactly when Biden came in the White House.
That's right. We need to defend this democracy, and we need to make sacrifices. We need to pay more for fuel because we're doing this for democracy, to spread democracy. Yes. Well, let's look at the democracy in the Ukraine here. We're calling it a basket case democracy here. Let's just take a look at a little bit of history background here. That's Yatsenyuk and Poroshenko. They were installed by the United States as prime minister and president, respectively, the interim government, after a bloody overthrow, violent overthrow of a democratically elected president, which the West did not like because he was of the wrong orientation. And then this was followed by the comedian who played president on television 2 years ago. Fantastic. But how bad was it? This is just scratching the surface. Let's take a look at a little bit of a timeline here. 2004, US, UK, EU, NATO backed a violent coup d'etat in Kiev. That's beyond debate. That's historical fact. However, you won't hear it on the BBC. They never mention it on the floor of the House of Commons. Everybody ignores this fact like it didn't exist.
Yeah.
So here we go. 2014, 2015, the Ukrainian military under Poro and company, they ran an anti-terror blitzkrieg. They called it an anti-terror operation. They dubbed the whole of the Russian-speaking population in the East as terrorists. Okay, that happened. That really happened. So they ran a blitzkrieg, and that prompted the Minsk Accords. So Minsk 1 and 2 in 2014, 2015, that was the de facto peace process, internationally recognized. But what happened after that? Well, Ukraine government stated its policy is not to ratify nor implement the Minsk Accords. They're very open about that. This wasn't a secret, but this was never mentioned. This is why the US and UK officials would never open their mouth and say Minsk in public, because this was their stated policy. This was known in the legislature in Ukraine. Everybody knew this. So obviously they're intentionally sandbagging the UN effectively mandated peace process.
Right.
So what else have we got to mention here? Well, this is important. The Kiev regime outlaws Russian language in certain areas, and I believe nationwide actually, legalized discrimination against ethnic Russians. What a burgeoning democracy this is. And by the way, if you look at the democracy index globally, Kiev is about 85th out of 160 or so. 60 or so. So they're not very high on the league table. Let's just put it that way. Here we go, 2014 to the present. Kiev regime outlaws certain Russian opposition parties. What else? They're arresting television station journalists, editors, taking TV off the air. This is normal bill of fare for Kiev, for this lovely democracy in Ukraine. And so, again, 2015 to the present, Ukrainian forces shelling civilians in the Donbass, who they've deemed as being not full people in their own country, not allowed to speak their own language. This is a population of 4 million, Mike.
Yeah.
So this 4 million people have been disappeared and canceled by the Western mainstream media, by our well-informed politicians, It's as if these 4 million people have no rights, don't exist. They might as well have fallen off the edge of the earth. Okay. So that's how we've got to this point. They've been completely erased. To this day, they won't even mention that there's millions of people living in there who were being targeted militarily by a country who were arming. I mean, so do you see where Russia might have a few problems with the situation? So they felt that because Minsk collapsed, they had no choice. If Minsk wasn't going to guarantee the security of the people of the Donbass, they're saying that's genocide. So we need to step in and provide military protection for the people of this region, restore their water, their electricity, their food, allow deliveries to come in, and basically do what Minsk was meant to do. For 7 years, they could have implemented Minsk. They intentionally did not. And the US and the UK and the EU were complicit in that, because as soon as Minsk was implemented, the quid pro quo was sanctions are lifted by the EU.
And we can't have sanctions lifted against Russia.
That's right. So now Minsk is dead. A new raft of sanctions have been lopped on top. Isn't that interesting how this has played out? Again, you won't hear this analysis on the mainstream media. You won't hear it.
This is the new normal for our security. Peace cannot be taken for granted. Freedom and democracy are contested by authoritarian regimes, and strategic competition is on the rise. We must respond with renewed resolve and even stronger unity. North America and Europe together in NATO. We are an alliance of 30 democracies standing as one. We will protect our people and our values. Democracy will always prevail over autocracy. Freedom will always prevail over oppression.
So he has said those words, democracy will always prevail over autocracy, as we come out of 2 years of what?
Well, not everybody's out of these 2 years. In France, there's millions of people on the street in France because the president and the government said you can't work, you can't buy food unless you take an experimental pharmaceutical product. Otherwise, we're going to discriminate against you. Same in Italy, also in Germany and other countries, Austria as well.
And of course, we should mention Canada. So is NATO going to act against Canada?
I think they should intervene in Canada and take out Trudeau. So democracy is the buzzword. So where did NATO get off now policing democracy? I thought it was an alliance to protect any members that got attacked by another country. I didn't realize their job is to promote democracy. When did that happen?
This is a very good question.
It's not written down anywhere.
No, indeed, but about the same time that NATO started talking about territorial integrity and borders, NATO considers itself to have NATO's borders. This is not a principle that's written into NATO's charter at all.
NATO's borders.
Yes.
So all sorts of problems here. This is what our forefathers called, and historical scholars called, entangling alliances. This is what led to World War I. That didn't go too well.
No.
Okay, so is entangled alliances. NATO is the epitome of an entangled alliance. It's gone way, way, way beyond its remit, and now it's causing wars. It's causing proxy wars in countries like Ukraine. Ukraine is a proxy war. It's Russia versus NATO. NATO is using Ukraine as a proxy.
Yes.
That's exactly, they're using our weapons. They've got our back, we've got their back politically.
And our training.
Our training. So it's a proxy war, just like the other proxy wars. It's just packaged a little bit differently. So in America, they're all up in arms about defending democracy. How dare Putin trample on the delicate, flowering, fragile democracy of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And Zelensky. Listen to this highlight reel here from the U.S.
The one thing that we all agreed upon, the attack on the Ukraine by the Russians is an attack on democracy.
Putin is terrified by the prospect of a
democracy at his border.
And that's why defending democracy both at home and abroad must be an urgent national security priority.
What is our democracy worth if we're not able and willing to stand against an invasion of another democracy?
I don't even know what to say to that.
So quite the democracy in the Ukraine, as we showed you in the previous segment here. So, beyond this, on from this point of view here. So Pelosi basically lost it, okay, when she was in her press conference and so forth. So here's Pelosi again. Just you have to marvel at the venom here. But go ahead and roll this.
This is a very evil move on the part of Vladimir Putin. He's a KGB guy who happens to be probably the richest man in the world because of his exploitation of his own people that he doesn't want them to know about. This, my friends, is our moment. This is the Sudetenland. That's what people were saying there.
The Sudetenland.
The Sudetenland. So she's invoking Hitler in World War II. So here's Biden. So Biden's thing now is, and Kamala Harris is saying, we need to basically suck it up for democracy. We're going to suffer. We're going to pay more at the pump. Hyperinflation, goods and services, food, it's all going to go up. But you're doing it for the people of Ukraine. We got a video here. Watch this.
I know this is hard and that Americans are already hurting. I will do everything in my power to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. But this aggression cannot go unanswered. If it did, the consequences for America would be much worse. America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. This is who we are.
The president has already said Americans will be facing some economic fallout or some hardships. Can you explain to Americans what exactly will they face if this happens?
Sure. As the president talked about in his speech, we are aware that, again, when America stands for her principles and all of the things that we hold dear, it requires sometimes for us to put ourselves out there in a way that maybe we will incur some cost. And in this situation, that may relate to energy costs, for example.
So basically they're saying you be prepared to pay. So everything they've done to deflate or to inflate the currency, to cause hyperinflation, all the COVID relief, all the dumping of billions of dollars and wasting it on test and trace, buying vaccines that all got dumped in a landfill or sent away to some African country that we don't care about. Okay, all of this stuff, furlough, and the list goes on, all the corporate welfare, all of that. And then jacking up the price of energy to pay for all these green policies. All of that has now been funneled into one very convenient scapegoat, and that is
Vladimir Putin.
Vladimir Putin. So job done, guys. Everything, all sins are absolved, and now everything's on Putin. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Let me get something straight. NATO promised that they wouldn't move an inch to the east. That was a lie. And now we are surrounded by an aggressive military alliance. NATO gladly bombed Yugoslavia under the pretenses of potential genocide. Did they bomb just military installations? No. NATO destroyed schools, hospitals, bridges, cultural monuments, private businesses, and industrial plants. Did you forget about that? Did you forget about how NATO pumped money and weapons into Georgia right before Georgia bombarded Russian peacekeepers and civilians? Of course you did, because your media doesn't want you to know. Did you forget how yet another territory was ripped away from Serbia? Do you not remember Kosovo? Did you protest then? I bet you didn't, and I bet you didn't even care. Did you forget the invasion of Libya? If you're in Europe, you can't forget. Thousands of migrants are your daily reminder of what your governments did to that country. Did you protest the illegal invasion of Syria by Turkey and the US? I bet you didn't. Do you care about Saudi Arabia starving Yemen? I bet you don't. Do you care, or did you care, about the illegal invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan under false pretenses? What, they aren't people to you? Why haven't you been vocal against the murder of children and civilians at Iraqi and Afghani weddings by American bombardment? Ah, that's right. They're brown people. They're probably worth less to you. Where were your crocodile tears when Kiev started bombarding Ukrainian Russians in the east simply for doing the exact same thing as the Ukrainians did in the west, was to get rid of a corrupt government? Where were your crocodile tears when Kiev shut off electricity and water to Crimea? Where was your Save the Ukrainian People when 48 civilian anti-Maidan Ukrainian protesters were rounded into a union trade house and burned alive, whilst those who tried to escape the fiery hell were beaten and shot? Do you by any chance know who the Madonna of Gorlovka is? Do you know what the Alley of Angels memorial is? Let me give you a hint. People engraved into that memorial aren't alive and they are not adults. Did you shed even one digital virtue signaling tear when the children at the children's beach in Zagreb were purposefully bombed by the Ukrainian military using illegal cluster bombs? I bet you didn't. But that's okay. How would you? Your mainstream media keeps you in the dark. For 8 years, the US and its allies have been pumping billions of dollars worth of lethal weapons into Ukraine. For 8 years, the Ukrainians have been waging a war with their own people in the east. And for 7 years, Russia and the people of the Donetsk and Lugansk republics have been patiently waiting for Kiev to adhere to the Minsk agreements. Should Russia have waited maybe 20 more years? You know, the amount of years that the US spent killing Afghanis. So whilst leaders like Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz and Ursula von der Leyen have been virtue signaling about the poor Ukrainians, they have been robbing the Ukrainians of their dignity, making their economy run on loans from the IMF, and basically robbing them of their future. And Russia is to blame when we were their primary trading partner? The West pushed Russia into a corner. Protect yourself from an increasingly hostile neighbor who wants to become part of a hostile military alliance called NATO and lose Nord Stream 2, for example. Or watch Russian Ukrainians get slaughtered by the thousands. And since it did, what do you think your tax dollars were doing in Ukraine? That's right. Your tax dollars were used by Ukrainians in the West to kill Ukrainians in the East. And you didn't give a flying fuck about it. So if you haven't been following this conflict from day one and now you put the blue and yellow flag on your photo, wipe away your crocodile tears, please, and find out why your governments have been supporting those who have made a Nazi criminal, Stepan Bandera, their national war hero. So if you haven't been crying for the collectively millions of dead Iraqis, Afghanis, Syrians, Libyans, Yugoslavians, and East Ukrainians these past 20 years, but you're crying crocodile tears for Ukrainian military installations, wipe them away and think about what your governments have been doing and what they're still doing. And I hope that this 8-year story of a war started by a criminal Ukrainian government against its own people can finally come to an end, and Ukrainians and Russians can finally live in peace.
Heard of. What's going on in Ukraine? First of all, it's a massive distraction. They're trying to distract you away from what's really going on in everybody's home country. Now, the Ukraine is, this is not what you think it is. The Ukraine, let's get technical first. The Ukraine is not a sovereign state. It does not have internationally recognized sovereign borders. It's still part of Russia, has been since the 10th century. But this is like Russia invading Russia. That's all it is. Now, second point. The Ukrainian people are very upset, particularly the Ukrainians in Australia. I get it. But guess what? You've been lied to, just like the Australian people have been lied to. We think we're a sovereign nation. We're not. The Ukrainians think they're a sovereign nation. They are not. See, the truth is slowly going to come out about what's really going on. And what's really going on is this. The Ukraine has been the center of the globalists for decades and decades and decades. 70 years at least. CIA, which is not a good organization. They're the implementers of deep state, let's say. They've been working in the Ukraine for 70 years, building up a resistance to everybody and everything. Why? Because they needed to bring the Soviet Union down, but they also want the resources that are in the Ukraine. That's what this is all about. Particularly Eastern Ukraine, massive natural resources that CIA goes in, gets control of, an American business interest, and they're not business, they're just robber barons. They're not legitimate businessmen, they just want to steal, and that's what goes on. And so they're taking that away from Russia and the Ukraine. And on top of that, it's the center of the deep state. They are going to tell you their stories about possible nuclear war and Vlad's the bad man. This is the war with Russia that they wanted with Hillary Clinton as president. Because she lost, the whole war against Russia was postponed. This is the plan they always had, to destroy Russia, because they don't have a banking system that is under the Rothschilds. What a dangerous course of action that is. So that's the Ukraine, and so pay attention, but please do your own research. Don't, for goodness sake, don't watch mainstream media, because if their lips are moving, just like the politicians, if the media's lips are moving, they're lying.
I mean, look at this footage. This is footage of Putin's troops bombing the Ukraine. Oh, sorry, that was the US bombing Iraq. Yeah, remember that one? Where they said they had weapons of mass destruction. Total lie. Everyone knew it was a lie. I knew it was a lie at the time. That was like, what, 20, 30 years ago? I was like, that's a total lie. And they just went in and killed like 1 million Iraqis for no reason. It was all based on a lie. And you know, no one stopped buying US products. They should have. Like, really? Like, if you were going to, like, stop buying one country's products for any reason at that time, it would have been a good reason. Because that was, like, one of the most heinous things ever done. But no, if it's the US that does it, it's okay, right? And it doesn't even matter if years later they just laugh about it. Like George W. Bush just laughing. No weapons of mass destruction over here.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
But anyway, forgetting about that, I can totally understand why everyone's on like the Ukraine side of this. I mean, look at what Putin's doing to the people in the Ukraine.
Hey, this is job crash test dummy. The fucking Nazis are burning us down. Then they're putting the firehouse. It's a scorched earth policy. These fucking Nazis. These are thugs. These are rent-a-cops. They're fucking Nazis. The whole... Fuck you! Fuck you, you fucking Nazi pigs!
Oh wait, that's New Zealand. Well, there must be a reason everyone's like all just instantly on the Ukraine side of this with all the horrible things Putin's doing, right? Like, look at this. It's Putin's kill squad surrounds a Ukrainian family in the mountains after killing a teenage boy and the family dog. The Russian soldiers then shoot a mother with a child in her arms. Oh, sorry. That wasn't the Ukraine either. That was the FBI and the ATF at Ruby Ridge. Ah, jeez. Well, I can totally understand why everyone's like so upset about what's going on in the Ukraine. I mean, look at this before and after photo. Here's before. Beautiful place. And afterwards, just absolutely destroyed by bombs. Oh, wait. That's Syria after the U.S. attacked it. But, you know, I could see why everyone's super pissed off at Putin. Like, what an animal. What a monster. Like, I found this.
Unconfirmed. Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Oh wait, that was Hillary Clinton and Libya. Huh. Well, you know, Putin, what a monster though. Like, we should like make it so anything any Russian person ever does, like we just hate them for all this stuff. Like look at this. Putin's been bombing like men, women, and children just randomly in like Yemen and Somalia for like years. Oh wait, that was like Barack drone bomber, Donald Trump, and now Joe Biden doing all that stuff. Huh. Well, if you think what's happening in the Ukraine is bad, wait till you hear what's been happening in Palestine for the last 50 years. I can see why the whole world is just mesmerized by this right now, you know, because this came out of nowhere. It's not like there hasn't been a Russian-Ukrainian war since 2014, where Soros and the US came in and overthrew another democratic government in the Ukraine, put in their own puppet Nazi government, and yeah, so I could see why everyone's so upset about this.
An American approach to digital assets is one that encourages innovation, but mitigates the risks to consumers. We've got that story plus your environmental, social, corporate governance score. But first, we have to, of course, talk about the war that everybody is talking about right now. Yemen, under longest period of Saudi heavy bombing seen since 2018. We take this from the fine folks at antiwar.com. The Yemen Data Project released its monthly summary of the Saudi-led coalition's air war in Yemen and found that the last 4 months have been the most sustained period of heavy bombing in the war since 2018. For the month of February, the Saudi-led coalition carried out at least 200 air raids and up to 716 individual airstrikes in Yemen. Since October, just last October 2021, the coalition has launched at least 200 air raids each month. The Yemen Data Project recorded 15 civilian casualties in February, a significantly lower number than the 426 in January, the highest monthly rate since 2016. The airstrikes in February focused on the Hajj Governorate, where 51 air raids were recorded. All 15 civilian casualties for the month occurred in 2 air raids. On Valentine's Day, the Saudi-led coalition targeted a water drill in the Al-Matama district of Al-Jawaf, killing and injuring at least 3 civilians. In the Abs district of Hajj on February 20th, an air raid hit a civilian house, killing a woman and a child and injuring at least 10 more people. Yemen Data Project found get these percentages. 11% of the bombings hit civilian targets. 18.5% hit military targets, and 70.5%, I don't know, can't be identified. 70.5% of the targets can't be identified. Civilian infrastructure that was hit by airstrikes includes communication sites. Always the first thing to knock out in war. You knock out their communications, their radio, their TV stations. Then, of course, you follow up and hit them in the belly and blow up farms and residential areas. Over a year has passed since President Biden vowed to end support for the Saudi-led coalition's offensive operations in Yemen, but the U.S. never stopped servicing Saudi warplanes that are bombing Yemen. And recently, not only did they not stop, they've escalated their role in the war by helping the United Arab Emirates intercept Houthi missiles. Pretty sure, James, the UAE was softened up. I believe it was President Trump. That's right.
The words fail me at times like this, because stories like this really bring home the absurdity of our society generally, and the way that it's structured, and the way that people can be made to look at any story that the mass media wants them to look at, and only think about that, only talk about that, only care about that, even if the exact same type of story is playing out somewhere else. In fact, on a bigger scale. Doesn't matter. They're not talking about that, so we won't think about it. So that civilian death toll for February, which was significantly down from January, looks like it's going to go up in March. Just from a few days ago, at least 80 Houthis killed in northwest Yemen fighting / airstrikes. So yes, again, Saudi-led forces carrying out a series of operations in northwestern Yemen's Hajjah district, killing at least 80 Houthis and wounding scores of others, including women and children. But those aren't the right type of women and children. Those aren't the ones we're focusing on. Just wait, because we all know that all the people who are crying their crocodile tears over Ukraine right now, like Holly and Phil on ITV's morning show, looking at the images of the girl singing in the bunker in Kiev, and they're crying on cue, I would say, being cynical, about that footage. Oh yeah, just wait until they find out what's happening in Yemen and find out, oh, it's the U.S. that's supporting this and has been supporting it since its inception, has been actively arming and funding and training the Saudis and guiding them on their airstrikes. No. We can't have this. We're going to have a big protest movement. We're going to start sanctioning Saudi Arabia. Oh, wait, no, we're not going to do that. What is the latest about the U.S. and Saudi Arabia? The latest headline, Biden rejected by Saudis and UAE as he tries to replace banned Russian oil. So, of course, we ban Russian oil. We got to get it somewhere. Hey, Saudis, can you just turn that spigot on a little bit more? No? Oh, you won't even take my phone call? Oh, sorry guys. Because as The Intercept helpfully tells us, Saudi-Russian collusion is driving up gas prices and worsening the Ukraine crisis. So, it's almost like Pandora's box is opening and all of this stuff is coming out. Ooh, who would have thought it? And who's actively supporting it? Oh, turns out it's the U.S. Wow, surprise, surprise. But again, we're not allowed to think about this. We're not allowed to talk about it. Just watch what people are doing on TV and emulate them like monkeys.
Amazon and other stores see a spike in sales of Ukraine-related goods. Now, no, people aren't buying actual Ukraine arts and products and foods and stuff. No, they're buying blue and yellow themed colored things made by slaves, most likely in China. And they don't think about that part and just think, oh gosh, I've got to buy all these tchotchkes. That shows my support. They can flip a switch and people will dance to COVID. They flip another switch and they can change how you say the word Kiev. They don't want anybody thinking about Yemen, period. Let alone, of course, any of the other half-dozen wars Obama started that Trump continued and now Biden as well.
And all of us have rightly condemned the crimes against humanity that are being committed by Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. And the government has moved instantly, within 5 days, to sanction Putin's regime and take urgent action. And the strength of language that was used, rightly, against Putin as a barbarian, as a thug, as a murderer, as a warmonger, all of which are true, all of those things apply to the state of Israel in its treatment of the Palestinians, and yes, the government is concerned about its use of language and doesn't feel it is appropriate to even use the word apartheid when Amnesty International, the most respected human rights organisation in the world, and Human Rights Watch, within a very short period of time, issue these damning reports, saying that Israel, since its foundation, has been built on a system of oppression and domination and apartheid and racism, involving the murder of unarmed, innocent civilians on a regular basis, arbitrary detention and imprisonment, land annexations, the displacement of people, the denial of basic fundamental rights to 6 million Palestinians who are displaced outside Israel and the occupied territories, to the right to their return to their homes, to the illegal blockade of Gaza, which has left, as they say in the report, Gaza in a permanent state of humanitarian crisis, denying people access to food, to water, and treating the Arab population as a whole, the Palestinian population as a whole, as an inferior race. I mean, it doesn't get stronger than this. And yet you want to be careful about your language. You're happy to correctly use the most strong and robust language to describe the crimes against humanity of Vladimir Putin, but you will not use the same strength of language when it comes to describing Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, when it is now being documented and detailed by two of the most respected human rights organizations in the world, and indeed has been alleged by dozens and dozens of non-governmental organizations, and to be honest, anybody who looks honestly at the decades of brutal, inhumane persecution of the Palestinians, successive assaults on Gaza, the annexation of their land and territory, the systematic application of apartheid rules, you don't want to even use the word apartheid. Never mind sanctions. 5 days sanctions against Putin and his thugs, 70 years of oppression by the Palestinians, and it wouldn't be, what was the word you used? It wouldn't be helpful to impose sanctions. Amnesty International are calling for Israel to be referred to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity. Will you support it? They are calling for targeted sanctions against Israeli officials who are perpetuating the system of apartheid, just exactly the same types of sanctions you've just initiated against Vladimir Putin. Will you support it? And I think the answer is clearly you're not going to. And then we ask the question, why? Why? And I haven't even got time for the briefing I organised this week about the people of Yemen and how Saudi Arabia, the most despotic regime in the world, armed to the teeth by the United States, Britain, France and others, killing 337,000 people in Yemen in the last 5 years, 10,000 children. Any action against the United States for arming them? Or Britain, or France, or Saudi itself? No. No action, no sanctions, no outrage. Now you see, if you're going to have moral standards, those standards have to be consistent. Otherwise they are not standards at all, they are just cynicism. And of course we all know the reason that the standards are not consistent is because to call out the apartheid state of Israel would be to run foul of the concerns of certain states that are now presenting themselves as defenders of democracy and so on, such as the United States, the UK, Germany and other powers, whose relationship with Israel, supporting it and backing it, means that the European Union's moral credentials are bankrupted.
And here's this. Do you remember when this happened? Do you know what this is? The United States and the Ukraine, the only two countries in the world that voted against a UN resolution that condemned Nazism. That's real. So the U.S. voted against that, and they said it was because it would inhibit free speech, while Ukraine voted against it because it had pro-Russian bias. So I'm all for free speech. And the argument's just weird that the government takes a stand internationally for free speech, even for Nazis, and meanwhile wants Joe Rogan silenced. I think Nazis killed more people than horse paste. Historically, I could be wrong, but there you are. Do you remember this, Max?
This happens every year. I mean, every year there's a UN vote to condemn Nazism. Russia introduces the resolution and the US and Ukraine vote against it. It's like an annual festival of Nazi apologia.
remember before the EU banned RT, the Biden administration openly supported Zelensky banning opposition media outlets that criticized the Maidan regime. This was never about democracy. It was a NATO-directed campaign for dominance by any means. So Zelensky in Ukraine, people don't know this because they never talk about it. He shut down the opposition or critical media in his country and jailed, imprisoned the leader of the opposition party. And that's who we're on the side of.
And the State Department cheered him on and encouraged him to do it, pushed him to do it. That was what they wanted. That was the outcome that the U.S. State Department wanted. They don't want Ukraine to be a democracy.
That's right. So that's the crazy idea that people are like Saturday Night Live and everybody, I stand with Ukraine, I stand with the Ukrainian people. Well, yeah, Ukrainian people we all feel sorry for, but their government is 100% corrupt.
The Ukraine never filed its borders with the UN.
I read that.
So they don't actually exist as a country in international law. They're still part of the Soviet Union and its heir, Russia. There's many legal precedents for this. So in other words, the reason why countries like China aren't going to condemn Russia is because it's not an invasion. They're not going against the UN Charter. This is a police action within their own legal borders.
Zulüm zulümdür. Filistin'de de olsa zulümdür. Rakka'da da olsa zulümdür. Musul'da da olsa zulümdür. İdlib'de de olsa zulümdür. Yemen'de de olsa zulümdür. Zulüm zulümdür. Zulmün A'sı, B'si, örgütü, cemaati mi olur? Onların istediği gibi düşünebiliyoruz. Onların istediği kadar ağlayabiliyoruz. Onların istediği kadar slogan atabiliyoruz. Böyle bir dünya vicdan sahibi insanların tahammül edebileceği bir dünya değildir. Böyle bir dünya iman sahibi insanların tahammül edebileceği bir dünya değildir. Yeryüzünü fesat ve zulümle doldurdular. Evleri işgal ettiler, doymadılar. Toprakları işgal ettiler, doymadılar. Kalplerimizi ve zihinlerimizi de işgal ettiler. Bizim terörist dediğimize terörist diyeceksiniz. Bizim ağlayın dediğimize ağlayacaksınız. Bizim yardım edin dediğime yardım edeceksiniz. Onun dışındakilere gelince susacaksınız diyorlar. Rabbim bu zulmü, bu münafıklığı, bu ikiyüzlülüğü sonlandırsın.